Over 10,000 years ago, a revolution began in the fertile lands of Anatolia, a revolution that would change the course of human history forever. This is the story of how the Anatolian Neolithic farmers, armed with seeds, livestock, and a new way of life, conquered Europe and spread agriculture across the continent. But how did they do it? What drove them to leave their homeland and venture into the unknown? And what impact did their journey have on the world we live in today? Let's start in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, where the first farmers began to cultivate the land around 10,000 BCE. This region, with its fertile soil and favorable climate, was the birthplace of agriculture. Here, people began to domesticate plants like wheat and barley and animals like sheep and goats. The Anatolian Neolithic farmers were among the first groups to transition from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle to agriculture, marking the beginning of the Neolithic Revolution in the Near East around 10,000 years ago. This transition was a gradual process that involved both environmental changes and cultural innovations. Here's how it likely unfolded. The end of the last ice age, around 11,700 years ago, led to a warmer and more stable climate in the Near East, which created favorable conditions for the domestication of plants and animals. The region known as the Fertile Crescent, encompassing parts of modern-day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, was particularly rich in wild plant and animal species that were suitable for domestication. This area became the cradle of agriculture. The Anatolian farmers began by cultivating wild ancestors of crops such as wheat, such as einkorn and emmer, barley, lentils, and peas. These plants were already part of the local diet of hunter-gatherers, but they started to selectively cultivate and harvest them. Over generations, farmers selected plants with desirable traits, such as larger seeds, easier to harvest husks, and higher yields. This process of selective breeding led to the domestication of these crops, making them more reliable and productive. As agriculture became more efficient, people began to settle in permanent villages rather than moving seasonally in search of food. This allowed for the storage of surplus food and the development of more complex societies. The Anatolian farmers also domesticated animals such as sheep, goats, cattle, and pigs. These animals were initially hunted, but over time, they were managed and bred for meat, milk, wool, and labor. The domestication of animals allowed for a more stable and predictable food supply, as well as the ability to use animals for plowing fields and transporting goods. This further supported the development of settled agricultural communities. The transition to agriculture required new tools and techniques, such as sickles for harvesting, grinding stones for processing grain, and storage facilities for surplus crops. These innovations increased the efficiency of farming and allowed for larger-scale food production. In some areas, early farmers developed simple irrigation systems to water their crops, which was particularly important in regions with less reliable rainfall. The shift to agriculture led to the establishment of permanent settlements, which allowed for the development of more complex social structures, including specialized labor, trade networks, and religious institutions. The increased food supply from agriculture supported population growth, which in turn led to the expansion of agricultural communities and the spread of farming practices to neighboring regions. Driven by the need for new resources and perhaps a sense of curiosity, these early farmers began to migrate. They moved westward, crossing the Bosphorus Strait and entering the Balkans. This was no small feat. It was a journey that would take generations, but it was one that would reshape Europe forever. By 6,700 BCE, these farmers had reached the Aegean coast, and by 5,700 BCE, they had spread into the Danube River basin. From there, they moved north into Central Europe and west into the Mediterranean. By 4,100 BCE, agriculture had reached as far as the British Isles and Scandinavia. But how did they manage to spread so far and so quickly? The key to their success was their ability to adapt. They brought with them not just seeds and livestock, but also new technologies and ways of organizing society. They built permanent settlements, developed tools for farming, and created pottery for storing food. These innovations allowed them to thrive in new environments and outcompete the hunter-gatherer populations that had lived in Europe for thousands of years. These early farming communities were tightly knit, with strong social bonds and a shared sense of purpose. They worked together to clear land, plant crops, and protect their settlements from predators and rival groups. This sense of community was crucial to their success, allowing them to pool resources and knowledge to overcome the challenges of their new environments. But the spread of agriculture wasn't just about technology and social organization, it was also about people. Genetic evidence shows that the Anatolian Neolithic farmers didn't just bring their crops and livestock to Europe, they brought their genes. As they moved into new territories, they interbred with the local hunter-gatherer populations, creating a new genetic mix that would become the foundation of modern European ancestry. According to a recent study carried out in 2018, the Anatolian Neolithic farmer ancestry remains the dominant genetic component in the DNA of present-day Europeans, ranging from approximately 80%, as in the case of Sardinians, to approximately 40%, as in the case of Lithuanians. This variation is due to the complex history of migrations, admixture, and population movements across Europe over the last 10,000 years. Southern Europeans, such as Sardinians, Greeks, Italians, and Spaniards, tend to have the highest levels of Anatolian farmer ancestry because the Neolithic farmers from Anatolia first spread into southern Europe, where their genetic impact was strongest. Eastern and Northern Europeans, specifically Baltic, Russian, and Scandinavian populations, have lower levels of Anatolian farmer ancestry, often around 40% to 70%. These regions were more influenced by Eastern and Western hunter-gatherer populations, who contributed more to the genetic makeup of these populations. These interactions weren't always peaceful, but they were often mutually beneficial. The hunter-gatherers learned about farming and animal husbandry, while the farmers gained knowledge about the local environment and resources. Over time, these two groups merged, creating a new way of life that combined the best of both worlds. As agriculture spread, so did culture. The Neolithic farmers brought with them new religious beliefs, artistic traditions, and social customs. They built monumental structures like Stonehenge and the megalithic tombs of Western Europe, which served as both religious centers and symbols of their growing power and influence. These monuments were more than just feats of engineering. They were expressions of a new worldview, one that was deeply connected to the land and the cycles of nature. They reflected the farmers' understanding of the seasons, the movements of the stars, and the importance of community in maintaining the balance between humans and the environment. Agriculture also brought with it a new relationship with the land. For the first time, humans were not just taking from the environment, they were actively shaping it. They cleared forests, drained wetlands, and created fields that would feed their growing populations. This new way of life was both a blessing and a burden, as it required constant labor and attention to maintain. But the rewards were great. Agriculture provided a stable and reliable source of food, allowing populations to grow and thrive. It also created surpluses that could be stored and traded, leading to the development of new economic systems and the rise of complex societies. Trade became a key part of Neolithic life, as communities exchanged goods and ideas across vast distances. This network of trade routes helped to spread new technologies and cultural practices, further accelerating the spread of agriculture and the development of new societies. By 3000 BCE, agriculture had become the dominant way of life in Europe. The hunter-gatherer way of life, which had sustained humans for tens of thousands of years, was largely replaced by farming. This transition was not without its challenges, but it laid the foundation for the rise of civilization as we know it. The legacy of the Anatolian Neolithic farmers is still with us today. Their innovations in agriculture, technology, and social organization laid the groundwork for the development of cities, states, and empires. Their genes are still dominant in the DNA of modern Europeans, and their cultural traditions continue to influence our art, religion, and way of life. So, the next time you sit down to a meal, take a moment to think about the incredible journey that brought that food to your table. It's a journey that began over 10,000 years ago in the fertile lands of Anatolia, and it's a journey that continues to shape our world today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. And as always, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. Until next time, this is the channel Our Earth, bringing history to life.